British popular music is indebted to the blues. Groups like the Rolling Stones, the Animals and the Beatles were inspired by music from Chicago and the Mississippi Delta, by African-American musical giants like Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf or Chuck Berry. It's often assumed that British interest in the blues began in the 1960s, but the blues had actually arrived in Britain much earlier, as early as the 1930s. Nowadays, we tend to think of the blues as a genre of its own, distinct from its closest relation, jazz. We might say that someone like Charlie Parker or Miles Davis can play the blues, but they're not blues musicians in the same way as B.B. King or John Lee Hooker are. But in the 1930s, 40s and 50s, this distinction was largely non-existent, and so it's within Britain's early jazz world that we'll find the earliest evidence of interest in the blues. Before the 1950s, labour restrictions meant that American musicians couldn't tour the UK, which meant that British listeners could only engage with the blues on record. Blues and jazz fans organised themselves into rhythm clubs. Here they played newly acquired discs and discussed the history of the music they listened to. By World War II, rhythm clubs had become more than just spaces for listening to records. They now hosted amateur performances and jam sessions. These brought jazz and blues away from the connoisseur and to the public for the first time.
Right at the end of World War II, I think there was a huge reaction against swing. There was a general feeling that this was rather bland commercial music. So in the same way as people wanted to forget about the carnage of World War II, they looked back to a more innocent, earlier age. One of the most telling examples of the way in which people dressed for jazz is the film that was made called Mama Don't Allow with the Chris Barber Jazz Band at the Fishmongers Arms in North London. And that film is actually a very carefully constructed attempt to show the complete social spread of people who went to jazz clubs. Just like the war, it brought everybody from all strata of society together.
The story of British blues is much longer than we tend to think. It didn't arrive fully formed in the 1960s. British interest in the blues runs parallel to what was happening in the United States throughout the 30s, 40s and 50s. Far from simply imitating what they heard on records, British listeners and performers took the music to their hearts and made it their own.